Imagine this: you've lived, you've worked, you've saved, and now enter your golden years not as a gambler, but as a wise steward. But here's the hard truth. If your investments are built on hope, not structure, you will lose. In the next few minutes, you will discover 3 safe investments that retiree in 2025 must own, not to get rich, but to guarantee that you never run out. When the storms of markets rage, your foundations will remain. Let's set those foundations today. When you get to a certain stage in life, it's no longer about swinging for the fences. The priority shifts to holding on to what you've got. People get this wrong all the time. They think retirement is some new beginning for risk taking. It isn't. If you've spent a lifetime accumulating capital, the single dumbest thing you can do is put it in jeopardy when the runway left in front of you is short. The rules of the game change as you age. When you're 30, losing half your savings in a reckless bet can be recouped with decades of work. When you're 70, that same mistake is permanent. You don't have the time, the energy, or the compounding runway to recover. So the mindset has to be adjusted. Protect first, chase later, and only in measured doses. Capital preservation isn't glamorous. It doesn't get you invited onto television shows where everyone is touting the next big stock or shiny object. It's boring. You'll hear about treasury bonds, insured deposits, inflation, protected securities, and, well, structured income products. These don't make cocktail party conversation, but here's the blunt reality: boring money survives and flashy money burns. You don't want to be the retiree explaining to your family why the latest miracle technology stock was supposed to secure their future, but instead evaporated their security. There's another reason to put preservation first. Human nature is flawed. When markets crash, most people panic and sell. If your holdings are structured around safety and predictability, you're not forced into those emotional decisions. You can sit calmly while others run around like headless chickens because your base is solid. Stability gives you discipline, and discipline is worth more than a percentage point of yield. Does that mean growth is irrelevant? Of course not. Inflation is real. Costs rise, healthcare bills arrive, and $1 20 years from now won't buy what it does today. So yes, you need growth. But growth is the second step, not the first. You add growth after you've cemented the foundation. That might mean a modest allocation to equities or real estate with durable cash flows. The key word is modest. You let those positions work in the background, but you never bet the farm. The farm has to be safe. The people who end up with peace of mind in retirement aren't the ones who shot for the moon. They're the ones who respected gravity. They took what they had, insulated it against foolishness, and let compounding and prudence do the heavy lifting. They understood that avoiding disaster was more powerful than catching lightning. It's not about brilliance. It's about avoiding stupidity. If you can remember this: preserve first, grow second, you'll stay out of trouble. The world is full of seductive voices promising riches if you'll just loosen your grip on safety. Resist them. You don't need home runs. You need to stay in the game without mistakes that take you out permanently. That's how wealth survives. That's how you win. Most financial mistakes in retirement come from ignoring time. People buy assets without asking a basic question: when will I need this money? If you don't match the timing of your needs to the timing of your instruments, you're setting yourself up for unnecessary pain. It's astonishing how many intelligent people overlook this. They'll put short-term living expenses in volatile stocks and then act shocked when a downturn forces them to sell at the worst possible moment. That isn't bad luck, it's bad planning. The logic is straightforward. If you know you'll need cash in 2 years, you don't park it in a 30-year bond or an equity that might be down 50% when the bill arrives. You keep it in something liquid and safe. Savings, short-term deposits, maybe a ladder of short bonds. That way, when the obligation comes due, the money is there. It's not complicated, but people let greed or laziness distort their judgment. They reach for yield without thinking about maturity, and they get punished for it. On the flip side, money you won't touch for 10 or 20 years shouldn't sit idle in a savings account earning next to nothing. That's how inflation quietly robs you. For longer horizons, you need instruments with a growth component. Tequities, real estate, or longer bonds that lock in higher yields. The mistake is mixing the two buckets. Short-term needs must be covered by short-term tools. Long-term needs are funded by long-term tools. Confuse the buckets and you've guaranteed yourself a problem. Think about it like building a bridge. Every span has to reach the next. If you miscalculate the distance, the bridge collapses. A retiree's income plan works the same way. The maturities of your instruments are the spans. If there's a gap, say you need income in 5 years, but your bonds don't mature until year 10. You're forced to fill it by selling something prematurely. That's when markets extract their toll. Timing mismatches turn safe instruments into dangerous ones. The beauty of matching duration is that it removes unnecessary stress. You don't care if stocks are down this year, if your next 5 years of expenses are already covered by safe maturities. That cushion lets you think clearly and avoid foolish decisions. It's discipline through structure. Without it, you'll always be reacting to markets instead of letting markets serve you. There's also a psychological dividend. Knowing you're short, term needs are secure frees you from anxiety. You're not staring at a screen every day wondering if you'll be able to pay the bills. That peace of mind is worth more than chasing an extra % of return. Most people underestimate the value of sleeping well. So the principle is simple but vital. Money you need soon should mature soon, and money you don't need for decades should be invested for decades. Respect time, align your assets with your obligations. Do that consistently, and you won't just preserve your capital. You'll preserve your sanity. People love to pretend they're comfortable with risk until the moment things go wrong. Then they discover what they really wanted all along was protection. A guarantee is not about maximizing return. It's about minimizing regret. The investor who ignores this spends his life trying to be clever. The one who understands it sleeps soundly at night. There's a reason insurance exists. There's a reason government-backed instruments have appeal. It isn't because they're exciting. It's because they remove the possibility of catastrophic loss, and avoiding catastrophe is 90% of the game. The history of markets is littered with the remains of people who thought protection was optional. They bought the hot product, the exotic derivative, or the leveraged play. For years it worked. Then in one bad season they discovered there was no floor. Once you fall without a floor, it's hard to get back up. Guarantees are the floor. You may not like the cost. You may complain about the limits, but you'll be grateful when the storm comes. Now, guarantees come in different forms. Some are explicit, like FDIC insurance on deposits or a contractual guarantee from an annuity. Others are implicit, like the strength of a government backing its bonds. In both cases, the common denominator is the same: protection against outcomes that would otherwise wipe you out. If you're retired, you don't get to shrug off ruin as a temporary inconvenience. Ruin is permanent. You can't earn it back over the next 30 years. That's why guarantees matter most when your timeline is short. Of course, nothing is free. Guarantees come with trade offs. Lower yields, fees, or lack of liquidity are the price you pay. The impatient person scoffs and says, "Why would I accept less?" But the wise person sees it differently. I'm buying insurance against disaster. That perspective shift is crucial. You're not leaving money on the table. You're purchasing peace of mind and ensuring continuity. The cost is the toll you pay to stay in the game. There's also a temptation to think you don't need protections because you're smart. Intelligence won't save you from black swans. In fact, it often gets people into more trouble because they believe they can outthink randomness. They can't. Protection is about humility, acknowledging that some forces are bigger than you and preparing accordingly. The right approach is balance. You don't put everything in guaranteed instruments. because then inflation erodes your purchasing power. But you make sure that the critical part of your portfolio, the part that covers survival and dignity, sits on a foundation of guarantees. Then you can afford to take modest risks with the surplus. The essentials are protected, the optional can fluctuate. In the end, what matters isn't how much you make in the good years, but how well you survive the bad ones. Guarantees and protections give you that survival edge. They may not excite you today, but they'll save you tomorrow. And that's the only kind of excitement worth having. People like to think diversification is only for those chasing big returns. They imagine spreading money across flashy stocks or industries and calling it a strategy. That's missing the point. Diversification isn't about owning 100 things for the sake of appearances. It's about not letting one bad outcome destroy you, and this rule applies just as much, if not more, when you're talking about the safe side of the ledger. Even among supposedly safe assets, concentration can hurt you. Safety isn't absolute. It has degrees and it has blind spots. Take bonds, for instance. Government bonds are considered safe, but they're not immune to inflation. If you park all your money there and inflation spikes, you'll find your safe investment quietly eating your purchasing power. The same goes for bank deposits. Yes, FDIC or equivalent coverage provides security against bank failure, but it doesn't protect you against the steady erosion of real value if rates lag behind inflation. Relying on one instrument or one guarantee is like putting all your fire insurance with a company that itself could burn down. You need redundancy, you need overlap. Diversifying within safety means building different layers of protection. Some assets give you liquidity, others give you stability of income, others shield you against inflation. Put them together, and the weaknesses of one are offset by the strengths of another. For example, a retiree could hold insured deposits for immediate needs, a ladder of high-quality bonds for predictable mid-term income, and some exposure to inflation, protected securities like TIPS for long-term purchasing power. Each is safe in its own way, but incomplete on its own. Together, they form a sturdier whole. There's also geography to consider. Holding only domestic government bonds assumes your country will always maintain stability. Most of the time, that's true, but history shows nations occasionally stumble. A small allocation to international bonds or global safety instruments reduces the risk that your fate is tied entirely to one government's fiscal discipline. Again, not because disaster is certain, but because acknowledging even slim risks is part of rational preparation. What diversification within safety really buys you is margin of error. If one piece underperforms, the others keep the ship steady. You avoid the trap of being right about safety in theory, but wrong in practice, because you overlooked one variable. It's not about maximizing return, it's about minimizing surprises. And in retirement, surprises are rarely good ones. The paradox is that people get lazy when it comes to safe assets. They put thought into which stocks to pick, but then lump their entire safe bucket into a single fund or a single bank. That's sloppy. If the purpose of safety is peace of mind, don't cut corners. Spread the risk, even inside the safe zone. When the storm comes, it won't matter how clever you sounded in the good years. What will matter is whether your safe assets were truly safe, or just safe until one crack appeared. Diversification within safety ensures there are no cracks big enough to sink you. That's the difference between sleeping well and learning the hard way. The two quiet thieves of wealth are inflation and taxes. Most people see risk as market crashes or failed businesses, but the real, relentless erosion comes from forces that look harmless on the surface. A dollar sitting idle today may look like a dollar tomorrow, but in purchasing power, it will buy less. That's inflation, and when you finally do earn a return, a slice of it goes to the tax collector before you even get to enjoy it. If you're not accounting for these two, you're running a race with weights tied to your ankles. Inflation is sneaky because it doesn't come with an announcement. It just shows up at the grocery store, the doctor's office, or the energy bill. Over a decade, even modest inflation compounds into a serious problem. Retirees especially feel the pinch. You can have a portfolio that looks safe on paper, savings accounts, CDs, bonds. But if every year the real cost of living rises faster than your income, you're slowly going broke without realizing it. Safety without inflation protection is an illusion. That's why you can't dismiss instruments like inflation, indexed bonds, or modest equity exposure. They're not about chasing riches. They're about keeping the wolf from the door 10 years down the line. Taxes are the other half of the equation. People love to brag about returns before taxes. It's meaningless. What matters is what stays in your pocket. A 5% return taxed heavily may leave you with less than a lower, yielding but tax-efficient instrument. And the rules change depending on jurisdiction, account type, and timing. Pretending taxes don't matter is like pretending gravity doesn't apply to you. It does. Smart planning means using the right accounts, deferring income when it's advantageous, and not overtrading just to rack up taxable events. The real trick is to look at your wealth in after-tax, inflation terms. Ask yourself, how much will this asset buy me in 10 years net of taxes? If the answer is less than today, it doesn't matter how safe or respectable it sounds, it's failing you. A so-called safe bond yielding 2% while inflation runs at 3% is quietly stealing your purchasing power. Add taxes on top, and you're compounding a loss every year. That's not safety. That's slow financial suicide dressed in a suit. None of this means you abandon safety. It means you redefine it. True safety is not just the absence of volatility. It's the preservation of real purchasing power. To achieve that, you need a mix. Some inflation protection, some tax awareness, and enough flexibility to adjust as rules and rates change. Ignoring either variable, taxes or inflation, means you're calculating only half the problem. The people who thrive in retirement aren't the ones who found the flashiest returns. They're the ones who quietly kept more of what they earned and defended their money against the erosion of time. Inflation and taxes don't make headlines, but they'll write your financial story if you let them. Better to recognize them early and plan accordingly than to wake up one day and wonder where your wealth went. What makes an investment truly safe is not the promise painted on the brochure. It's in the structure, protections, and consistency. By 2025, retirees who lean only on yield, chasing or high risk ideas will be tested by market shocks, subtle inflation, or interest rate surprises. But those who build their nest eggs with guarantees, known cash flows, and a cushion of safe reserves will not just survive, they will command serenity. So here's your charge. Before you make another speculative move, pause. Ask, does this preserve capital? Does it produce reliable income? And is it protected against the abyss?